hello, and welcome again to the Skillwork Forum. My name's Tim. I'm joined with my partner Brett here, as always, and we just gather and talk about industry issues, emerging trends, and really challenges surrounding the skilled trades. And this topic we're going to talk about today is maybe a little bit different, but we hope it's helpful to everybody there and maybe a little bit educational. There's kind of an old saying, Brett, out there, a maxim that not all things are created equal, and as I thought about that, it's more like very rarely are things created equal. And that's definitely true with what we call staffing models or staffing agency approaches, supplemental labor, business models, really the business that you and I are in, Brett. And we thought today that because there's so many models out there, and maybe you've had experience with some, maybe not with others, and you may have some preconceived notions, we thought today we'd just try to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be good. We'll get into it today and just kind of talk about the staffing industry as a whole is obviously a huge industry, but there's been different models that have been created for different reasons. So we're going to unpack that a bit more today. So.
Yeah, and that's true. It's there are a lot of different models. Even as I looked into this a little more, some that I was like, oh, so that's what that's called.
Yeah,
I wasn't quite sure, but. There are some that are more specific to you and to the skilled trades, but there's a few others we're not going to go into in much depth today, but just to touch on them at a high level. There's ones that are probably more specialized. So briefly on those, there's ones that that are often called the executive search. So think about when somebody's going after a new CEO or a C-suite individual, or maybe if you're a sports person. A lot of times they put these companies together that go out and look for that high-level new football coach. So that would be like an executive search model. Typically not something we see in the skilled trades. There's a couple of other things that have to do with augmenting your own internal recruiting team. One is you can actually have on-demand recruiting, which in, I guess, simple terms, it's you rent a recruiter.
Yeah.
Kind of rent a recruiter and have them augment your recruiting staff for a season that you need a little bit extra help here. So there are companies out there that actually do that. I mean, there's obviously they have to come in and learn your model and all that, but that is an approach. Companies out there provide those recruiters. There's actually even companies that typically the ones that do that, they also have what they call RPO, or recruiting process outsourcing. So essentially, it's like all of your recruiting and even all of your HR is outsourced to a company that just does all of that for you. So just like many companies have outsourced IT support, as we do, there are agencies out there that allow you to outsource all of your recruiting. So that's recruiting process outsourcing. So those three: executive search, on-demand recruiting, recruiting process outsourcing. Typically, we don't see those much in the world we live in. But there are three that we tend to focus on.
Yeah, we're going to spend the majority of our time, today unpacking those three. And I think for most people, these are probably the three, at least two of the three for sure, but probably all three at this point that you're most familiar with. And that would be the traditional, what most people refer to as the headhunter model. We're going to unpack that a bit today, where obviously somebody's going to go out and find you that individual, and then you're going to hire them and pay a fee. And we'll unpack that some more. And then obviously the other one is the temp model, or the temp agencies. There's a lot of large organizations that are built specifically around finding temporary staffing. We'll unpack that as well. In that there's some areas that it clearly is the best model for, and then there's some areas that maybe it's not the best model for.
Right.
And so then the third one, the one that's most dearest to our heart, is the travel staffing model, and that Skillwork, that's what we do, is travel staffing. Now, while that model is very known to most people, primarily in the medical or in the nursing, the travel nursing industry, we took that model and adapted it to the skilled trades, which is, that part is a little more unique. And if you're watching this, if you haven't, watched Tim and I before and talk about this, that may be something a little bit new. But we'll unpack that a little bit more as to where we think it fits the best. So.
And I think when we were talking about these, Brett, you talked about each of these has strengths. So we're going to try to look at these as objectively as possible. There are pros and there are cons to everything. But, I mean, you had a good analogy. It's like there are tools, some tools that do the job and maybe not the job the best.
Yeah, well, yeah. My dad used to, he was a maintenance refrigeration engineer, and so I kind of grew up in the trade space. He was a lot better at it than I was, but he would, if I picked up a set of pliers to tighten a bolt, he was going to quickly point out to me that that job was meant for a wrench, and so that the head of that bolt was still, looked the way it's supposed to when it's done. So the pliers would do the job, but it wasn't necessarily the best tool for the job, and that's a little bit of what we'll talk about.
Yeah, my dad he was an electrician. We've talked about this, and I think if he could, forever do away with every crescent wrench on the planet, he would. He thought, yeah, you didn't pick up a crescent wrench to do a tool. That's for a wrench or a socket. But, hey, they have their place as well. But I think the point being, use the right tool for the right job.
Yep.
It does it better and it's more effective. So that's really what we're going to look at here. We're going to look at those. And so Brett mentioned the first one that we're going to jump into is professional in the trade space that we work in. It's called contingency hiring. Most people, though, know it as headhunter. Not sure that's necessarily a positive reflection of that, but just so that we are all talking off the same sheet of music, when we're talking contingency hiring, you probably know it as headhunter. So what is a headhunter? What does this model look like? Essentially, companies, an agency will contract with you to find and place candidates based on some predetermined fee. So it's a lump sum fee. You give them the requirements. They go find applicants. They send you the applicants. Once you decide to hire one of their candidates, then you pay them a fee. Typically, there's some caveats, some performance-based, some time constraint, maybe 30 days, 60 days you have to be able to, say this person isn't working out. But typically, everything is kind of front-loaded up there, and most of the risk is on you as the client that hires them. So they get their fee up front, then they're off looking for the next one. So why is this called headhunter? I think primarily because of a lot of agencies out there, they actively are out there actively recruiting, and some would say poaching people from maybe your competitors or other companies, or even your company, the people that are working for you that are getting called. And I guarantee you, if they are skilled craftsmen, they are getting calls and they're getting people that are reaching out to them. It's becoming more and more a real thing. So they often poach people from your competitors, and they're the candidates that they place in front of you to potentially, go to work. So there's some pros to this model and also some negatives.
Yeah, for sure. So, it's interesting. I was listening to another podcast this morning. I'll do a little shout out for, not that he needs it, he has plenty of followers, Pat Lencioni, who runs the Table Group and has a podcast. But his podcast this morning, Tim.
We expect him to shout us out.
He usually does, I've noticed.
He does. Mentions us prominently.
But his podcast this morning was on this exact title. I think the title of the podcast was Poaching. And he was talking about, you better figure out how to retain your employees because somebody's coming to get them. And so that model, that headhunter model, that is very, very true. And so, the pros of the model is very, it's almost everybody is familiar with it. There is, I've often said when people will kind of try to understand our model versus a headhunter model, and I've often said, there's a headhunter on every corner. If they can solve your skilled trade problem, then you probably use them. The positive side of that, there's a headhunter on every corner. And so it's a very widely and established model, type of thing. And so typically, these companies, they typically have a pretty good database. They have a pretty good database of individuals that they can provide. For full disclosure, we use headhunters here occasionally to find staff for ourselves internally, not for the external work that we do, but if we need somebody for our accounting team.
Like a specialized thing that, that's not really in our niche, and, we don't want to spend cycles going and looking for those, so people do it well.
Yeah,
right?
yep, that's what they do. So the kind of the point of, sometimes I think probably in some of our previous podcasts, it probably sounds like sometimes like we're picking on the headhunter model or picking on the temp agency model, and really that's not true at all. We're just simply saying they have their place and they're very good at certain things. They're just not necessarily the right tool for everything, but in their space. So the other thing, as Tim said, you don't pay while you pay all the cost up front. You don't pay anything until you select somebody. So they don't charge you while they're out looking, unless they can find you a solution. They really, they just have loss. They don't make anything until they place somebody. So
just as an example, I mean, you're talking probably anywhere from 25 to 30, 40, even 40% of the first year's base salary is what the fee that they'll be looking for up front once you hire that individual. So there is a lump sum cost up front.
Yep.
And you can see the attractiveness from the agency's perspective of, they get that money up front, and so there's a lot of people out there that pursue that kind of business model because it's, it allows them to. It's kind of a quantity based.
Yep. It's a fairly lucrative model, if you can get in with the right organizations and continue to place. So I think the negatives or the cons of the model is, they don't have any skin in the game. They basically get you that person and they walk away. It's not their employee. Now, the reality of that is there's going to be some strings attached that that person, needs to be there for some period of time. But I've talked to a lot of companies. I was one of those companies who used that model, hired a salesperson or whatever, paid $30,000, $40,000, whatever we paid to the headhunter, and 6 months later, that person was gone. I talked to a lot of companies that say the reality is the retention of those individuals coming through that model is no better than your own retention. And so, at some point, after 6 months, they're not giving you your money back. so that's kind of on you. So that's that's a negative, or that's the risk of the model, because you are paying it up front. I think the other big area, and I don't know if this is a con or just the reality of the model, is it was built around the professional services. We mentioned a minute ago, accounting. That model, if you're looking for, we have a gentleman on our team who recruits for us. He came out of that model, and it was in the banking industry. So in that type of area, you're looking for bankers, you're looking for accountants, you're looking for salespeople. IT, very much so. Yeah. But it's not. If we're tying this back to what we spend our time in, which is the skilled trades, it's not a model. Now, if you're looking for a maintenance manager, then yeah, you may go to a header. But if you're looking for mechanics, that's not a model that's really designed to vet those individuals and to do that type of work. So again, it's a tool. It's a great tool for the right application, but not a tool that works very well when you get into the skilled and some of the other spaces. And even for that matter, and we'll talk about that in a second here as we transition into temp, if you're looking for production workers, you're not going to go to a headhunter,
Right. So. Yeah, so that kind of leads into this next model that we talk about. So often called the temp agency, or sometimes temp to perm agency, temp meaning temporary to permanent. So this model is similar in one regard to the headhunter, but they're looking to find employees for you that they are providing to you for a fee. And they find employees typically to fill either temporary needs, seasonal, short-term needs. During the COVID impact, a lot of these companies were providing employees for a lot of service industries. A lot of like the delivery fulfillment companies, like the Amazons of the world that had those people, they used a lot of these folks to fill a temporary need. So that's really what they do. They're generally best for companies that have very well-known requirements with very low onboarding or training required. I could use one of these agencies if I can have somebody come in and 30 minutes later they're being productive, But the jobs, again, that we focus on, that's not a reality. Our jobs it requires understanding a lot more in depth, not only your culture, but their skill set required, the equipment. I mean, it's just a lot more to it. So think about that. I'm not denigrating people that are used to fill these roles, but the fact is, people that can do a job pretty quickly with very little ramp on time, it's great to use these kind of models. So maybe your production line workers, for example, would be this type of agency. They generally work on a high volume, lower fee. So let's say you're looking to compare one of those type of agencies with what we do, and you go like, wait a minute, these guys are only, X amount, and you guys are X plus. Why is that? Well, their model is very much, high quantity. They're going to push a lot of candidates to you, but there's very little vetting, and they have very little long-term skin in the game. And we'll explain more about our model and maybe differentiate that as we go forward. But these candidates that come to you from a temp agency, rarely, if ever, do they have any benefits, any commitment to the mothership. So they don't have 401k, they don't have health, they don't have dental. Certainly no PTO. There's nothing like that. So the challenge then, most people want those things. So if I'm hired through a temp agency and I come to work for you, I'm filling a short-term need. I am in the back of my mind, if I'm one of those temp employees, I'm thinking, I'm looking for health insurance. I'm looking for a more permanent position. I'm looking for stability. So the first chance that I get to take that, I'm gone. And that's really what we hear a lot, is just the turnover is so rapid. So you almost have to get, no knock on chiropractors, but it's almost like chiropractor. You got to keep going. So, and a lot of times they search locally too. So it's the pool is, they're going to be looking at the same pool as you do. So jump into some, what are some of the benefits of this model and what are some of the drawbacks, Brett, on that?
Well, like you said, it's a high volume model. So a temp agency. I use my background. We've spoken about before. I was in that food manufacturing space for 30 years, and when I started a facility making bacon, to be specific, we started out the plant. I used a temporary agency. 100% of my employees were, because I didn't want to go find them. I needed to deal with getting that open. But to the point, Tim, they could find me the volume, which is why they were attractive to me. And I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit, but because the negative of that was exactly what you said. They were temporary employees, and they all wanted to eventually feel like they had a permanent home and had benefits and those kinds of things. So eventually, after 6 months or so, then we hired all the ones that wanted to stay. But the pro of that model was I needed volume, and I needed it quick, and I didn't want to deal with all the others. So, and they do serve a very a broad but a very specific niche, in that they are typically administrative roles, general labor roles, production type roles, which would fit into that general labor category. So that they're going to go out and find. And today, right now, in today's current market, while what we focus on is the shortage of skilled trade, which is large and growing. You got the same issue, even multiplied over here. Yeah. Every plant we talk to is running somewhere between, anywhere from 15 to 20% short on production workers that they just can't find. So huge demand, huge opportunity, very difficult for even those temp agencies to find those individuals, because their model is built, as Tim said, around looking locally. So the negatives or the cons of the model with the high volume becomes less quality. There's pretty minimal. It sounds degrading. I almost hesitate to use it, but it's a very common term. If they can fog a mirror, then send them our way. And so and that's a little bit of that model. We talk about it with ours. Our goal in our model, which is not on this huge volume scale of production type or general labor, we want to be right 80% of the time. The reality of a temp model, they're throwing numbers at a game with the hope that about 20% of them will stick.
Yeah.
It's almost a flip of the opposite, but it's a volume thing. Right. So obviously, as we talked, in the name temp agency, not only is it a temporary employee, but that employee feels temporary. And so because they don't, it's, hey, we've got an opportunity over here for you. You might be there for 2 weeks. You might be there for a month. You could go there permanent. But the only permanent comes, they're not going to hire you. The temp agency isn't going to hire you. They're going to place you.
Right.
And so with it comes just a lack of, kind of commitment that you see. And then specifically kind of, rounding and tying it back to what we do is the temp model, again, while our model, for full transparency, is not good at finding general labor and production type employees, this model, I would argue, is not good at finding the skilled trades. It's a niche. It's not a niche. We're more of a niche, and ours is more narrow. A plant's going to need 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 maintenance techs. They're going to need 200 production employees. And so, but it's not designed for the high skill and the advanced qualifications. When we started our business, to go after this, to be quite honest with you, we spent probably the first 6 months trying to convince people we weren't a temp agency because in this specific skilled trade space, somewhat out of desperation, and it's part of kind of the whole discussion here today, is because there's this growing need for skilled trade talent. The initial 2 model options were headhunter and temp agency. So as a company, you naturally went there and said, help me, I need help. The reality was those models were not built to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And it's somewhat what we recognized, which now rolls us into, the last of the 3, which Tim will unpack here, which is the travel staffing.
Yeah, it's unfortunate in some regards that that kind of, because of the experience, and that's the way, as Brett really explained well, their model is designed in high volume and pushing you candidates, that you need now to fill a need. And because they're looking for 20%, that means they got an 80%. Let's call it what it is: 80% failure rate. 80% of those guys are not going to be a good outcome for you. And so you, on the other end of the experience, staffing agencies, if that's been your experience in your mind, that is not a good path to choose because it's proven to you that it's not effective specifically for your skilled trades gap. So that rolls us into kind of this third model that we Skillwork really falls into, and that's the travel staffing model. And Brett unpacked it a little bit. This is a model that has been around as a business model for 25 years, and essentially it started in the medical industry, more specifically the nursing, because there was a huge demand for nurses. They weren't being filled. This model sprung up to attract, retain, hire nurses in that profession, and then travel them around the country to fill the needs in hospitals where they couldn't readily be found. So that business model then has been used in a couple of other different domains, and in our world, we looked at that. We just happen to be in an area where there's many of those companies that call Omaha, where we're from, home. So we were able to study that model and be able to apply it to this space, the skilled trade space. So what is it? If you're not familiar with this model, essentially, we work in partnership with you. Let's say you have a need for a dozen skilled technicians at a manufacturing facility. We work with you to understand your needs. Much like some of these other agencies, we work hard to really get a firm understanding of what your requirements are. So we get those requirements. We have an agreement with you to go out and find those candidates. We find those candidates. We do our companies like us do a lot of upfront vetting, a lot of testing, a lot of vetting, because when we attract candidates like this, ultimately we hire them. They become our employees. They fit your needs, but our employees, then we essentially loan them to you or even lease them to you, for lack of a better word, on a short-term contract, and we travel our guys across the country. So we'll travel them to a location for a short period of time. Sometimes it becomes a longer period of time. It just depends on your needs. And it becomes really a partnership between us and you as a client. We have long-term commitments. We have commitments to our skill workers. That's what we happen to call our employees that we hire. We generally, companies like us, give them benefits, competitive benefits, including 401k, PTO. So they're cared for. They have everything they need, and they have a sense of stability, because we have committed to them that you're now a skill worker. You work for us. Our job is to make sure you get placed in a place where you can thrive and meets our clients' needs. So you take away that kind of lack of uncertainty about where they're going to land. So the other strengths to this kind of model is we don't look just local. Matter of fact, it's rare that where you're located, we're looking for people in that area. We're looking nationwide for specific skill set that you need. After we vet them and make sure it's a good fit, you also engage in that. You interview, you make the final decision. You don't just get somebody we send to you. But then that individual travels from, let's say, from Jackson, Mississippi, and we're going to travel him up to Green Bay, Wisconsin. So he's not in your local area. So he comes up there, and his focus, he or her focus, is to work. I mean, they're up there to work. So long hours, focus on what they're doing. That's really their ability to help augment your staff and help alleviate some of your concerns. It often leads to a direct hire. So we have elements of headhunter in that sometimes our clients want to hire the people that we bring to them. We have a means of doing that. That's not our primary desire or not our primary model, but we do that often. And we want to make a way for that to happen as well. So again, these are our W-2 employees. They work for us. We take care of them with benefits and stipends, and they're well cared for and stable. So that's kind of the travel staffing model. And Brett, you're close to this as well. Anything to add to that? Certainly what are the benefits to this and the cons?
Yeah. And so, we'll try to be transparent on both of those, even though this is obviously the model we live in. But one of the big pros and the travel skilled trade space is obviously newer. We've been doing it for about 4 years now, and based off of the demand and the need for skilled trades. But the proof of the validity of the model and the ability to impact and meet high demand of advanced skills is really the travel nursing. The travel nursing model is 25 to 30 years old. Roughly 15% of all nurses in the U.S. right now are travelers. And so most people don't know that, but that's the reality. And so that's the way that the hospitals and other medical facilities, not just hospitals, but any place that has a nurse or different types of things, that space has expanded into different physical therapy and whatnot.
Lab technicians,
Yep.
I've even heard doctors are starting.
Yes, there are some of that too. But I don't know. I could be bold and say that that's where we're headed in the skilled trades. That 10% or 15% of your skilled trade workforce, in reality, if you're going to meet not just finding bodies, but finding the talent that you need, that there's a on a different time, call me and we'll talk about why I think that's probably where we're headed. But the fact is, there's a proven model out there that it works. You have to kind of, as a business leader, you have to kind of, in the old days, like I said, I was in that business. We put a shingle out and somebody showed up and we hired them, and that's just the way it worked. Well, the reality is they're not there anymore, and they're going away faster. And we've talked about that a lot in other podcasts about that. Just the shortage and the people leaving the workforce. So one of the big pros, the ability to find high demand of advanced skill set. And we're seeing it in what we do, and definitely in the travel nursing. There's a lot of proof in the model's ability to impact in these specific areas. So Tim talked about, we don't look locally, so our ability to find great candidates is part of it. It's a variety of ways that travel companies do it, again, referring to the nursing as well, is they're finding those nurses, or they're finding those maintenance technicians, automation technicians, but we're doing it with a wide net. The difference is, and one of the big pros of the model is that they literally come to work, they feel very taken care of. So it's not like, we're just placing you here as the headhunter model, or you feel very temporary, as in the temporary model. No, you are a Skillwork employee. You are a Fusion, which is a nursing company here in Omaha, employee, and then you're placed out there. So the idea that, well, yeah, I'm here, and maybe I end up staying there, but then if not, I'm going somewhere else. There's nothing that feels unstable,
right?
I guess, about it. And so the benefits and so forth. The other, similar to the headhunter, but I would say even expanded on that, ours also is you don't pay up front. Now, we often say, if we're a headhunter, because some of our clients obviously do want to hire our folks permanent, and some of our travelers end up wanting to go permanent after a period of time. So we often say it's a try it before you buy it, where the headhunter model is buy it and then try it. Ours is the opposite. So you get to really determine if both sides, both for the skilled worker and for the client, you get to determine, is this a good fit?
Yeah.
And before that, and you're not paying that upfront cost. You're paying, we charge you on top of just the normal, loaded hourly cost, and so you're paying by the hour, not by the hope.
Yeah, it's like a consumption fee. So as you use them, so it's not like you pay ahead of time. You pay it as you use it. So.
Yep, exactly. Yep, pay it as you use it is a great way to put it. So those are clearly the pros and the impact that this model can have in fitting those things. The cons are, there's more logistics to it. We have to manage the lodging and the travel and that pieces of it. Now that con really isn't for the client. It's just a reality of something, because we deal with all of that on our side. But it still all has to get managed, and these individuals are out there, and clearly this is not a model that fits everybody's lifestyle. So for some individuals, the travel and the housing is not something that they want to sign up for. Right. So and we understand that. So we always tell our clients, and it's definitely the same. We just talked about a minute ago. 15% of all the nurses are travelers, and so for those of us that are quick with math, that means that 85%, you're not solving all of the problem. 85% are still local nurses. It's the same with us. We're not going to come in and be very likely are we going to be 100% of your maintenance staffing.
Right.
We're maybe going to be in that same number. 10, 15, 20%. We have some clients where we're probably 75% of their staff, but that's just based on their circumstances. So, and then really the last is like anybody, we have to learn every client's their culture, their need, not picking on our own clients, but to be quite honest with you, it usually takes a couple passes for them to be able to articulate to us, because they're not really sure what they need.
Right.
so
I'll tell you when I find it. It's like they'll find me a rock, and I think that's a great point, Brett, is that a lot of times, oftentimes, hey, it's our challenge to find out what your requirements and your culture is, but there's also a learning curve on your side as a client, because again, this is a little bit of a new model.
Yeah.
And you got to figure out, all right, how is this different? And it is different because we really invest a lot of time up front to try to get it right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. No, it's if there's a con to that, I think that's a good point. You have to, as a client of ours, and it's the same with the hospitals. They're a lot further into it. There's not a hospital out there that isn't familiar with travel nursing, where there's still a lot of companies that we work with, whether it's manufacturing and construction. This is new. We're showing up with a new solution to a very known problem, but now trying to assimilate that in, and how do I make that work, and all those things. That there is a
bit of a learning curve.
Yeah, there's a learning curve in that, and
Yeah.
so I think those things, and again, us learning and making sure that we're vetting people properly and finding the right folks is something that we just have to work together to get done.
Yeah, and I mean, like any new industry or model that we've done, we continue to learn, we continue to get better, and we're constantly evolving and changing this. And Brett mentioned or alluded to that we've tried filling some of those needs that maybe a traditional temp to hire agency would do. We've tried to address some of the needs of our clients, and frankly, our model just is not. It's the crescent wrench when you need a real wrench for that job. So we oftentimes we for lack of a better thing, we pride ourselves on being very honest with you. If we think our model is good for you and we can help you, we'll tell you that, and we'll be upfront about it. If we think that your needs are really better suited to a different model, we'll do our best to try to help you with that. But oftentimes that's not us.
Right.
So we'll be very clear about that too. So hopefully, this touching on these models help clarify some of them and the ones you engage with, and know the difference between not all models, not all agencies are created the same. Do your homework, meet with them, try to understand their model, let them unpack what they do, and see if it's the right fit for you. Not every solution, not every company's needs are suited to every model. So get to know them, make sure they align with what you need, and particularly your values and your culture. That's one that's often overlooked in some of these other models. It's really huge to us. So if you're interested in learning more about any of these models, or certainly what we do at Skillwork, we'd love to talk to you. Just reach out to us. There's a link. You can go to skillwork.com. There's access to us there. One of our folks would be happy to reach out to you and see if it's maybe our model would be something that would be able to help you in the future. So hopefully, again, this was helpful to you. And until next time, thanks very much.